Welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a standalone episode on the film The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, directed by Larry Blamire. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, co-author of California Tiki, coming this August from the History Press. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running indie comic Halloween Man, and coming July 4th from Comixology and Sugar Skull Media, the new Lucy Chaplin Science Starlet Special. Drew, say hello.
I am also a leader in the fields of science.
In the field of science, the very, very important field of science. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. She's also a member of the improv a cappella vocal group In Harmony's Way. Say hello, Julia.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Okay, The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. I'm very excited because we've been doing a lot of standalone movies that are just personal favorites or oddities or curiosities or lost gems that we want to share with one another. The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra is what I have brought to you. It is a 2001 independent science fiction parody film directed by Larry Blamire. The film is a spoof of B movies released during the 50s. It was videotaped on a budget of less than $100,000 and then converted to black and white in post-production. Blamire acted in and directed the film. He wrote the screenplay. He provides the voice of the skeleton. His wife, Jennifer Blair, plays Animala. All right, let's get our opening thoughts, and let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go if there's anything left to say in the introduction. So, Julia, I don't know if this is your first time seeing The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, but lay it on us. What are your opening thoughts?
Well, you have talked about this movie so much, Jason, that I would have sworn that I'd seen it before because how could I not have, given how much you talked about it? But I had not. And in fact, I don't think I knew what to expect. And I thought it was hilarious. I laughed a whole lot. I didn't really understand going in that it was a modern movie. I didn't know anything. I didn't know it was a modern movie parodying old films. And so I just got such a kick out of it once I realized that, because I really recognized, having done all these episodes that we've done now with movies from the 50s, a lot of the things that they were poking fun at, and just thought it was really clever. The dialogue it's just hilariously bad, and it's all very funny. So I look forward to kind of, I'm reading in some quotes from the from IMDb just to as we go through, because they're just so funny. So I really got a kick out of it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Drew, so I don't know, I think this is actually one of your favorites. What are your thoughts, Lost Skeleton?
I like this movie a lot. I actually saw it in the theater, and I had a copy of it for a few years. It was actually in my regular rotation. That's when I lost in the divorce to my first wife. Actually, she got to keep Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but this was kind of a love at first sight movie. It really does an excellent job of it's a very specific type of 50s B movie, because it's not parodying like something that Universal would have put out during this time period, like one of the Creature from the Black Lagoon movies or something. It's more like a Sam Katzman level B movie, or maybe even something like we would have seen like Ed Wood attempt to do. So it's like almost like a Poverty Row science fiction vibe, but it does a very, this is what we call affectionate parody. And I've long said I feel like the best parody comes from a place of, you actually enjoy the thing you're parodying, which, these people clearly do. It's not coming from a snide place. It's coming from we love this. We're ribbing a little bit, but we still love it. And I think that's why I enjoy this movie so much, is that it's almost like getting another 50s science fiction movie, just with added humor on top.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I can totally see that. Now, Tony, where are you coming in on this?
I think it runs really on the razor's edge for me. Of it is obviously affectionate, like what you're talking about. I don't think you can parody these movies in the way this does if you don't love the genre. It's not disingenuous, like I've seen a bunch of irony-laden BS that's been foisted upon us over the years that has all these callbacks of like, remember that? That was dumb, right? Ha ha. It doesn't feel like that. But for me personally, because the dialogue is a lot of it. It's a razor's edge on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, I kind of wish. I mean, you do things for a budget, and well, again, it's not cool for me to go, well, I wish it was this other movie that may or may not exist. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So that's not really fair. You know, it would have been cool if it had been filmed on, you know, crappy black and white film stock to kind of place it in the thing. But
Yeah.
you don't always have the money for that, you know, which is, it's funny that video is cheaper, but it is. So there's a lot of really great stuff here and a lot of really close to that era dialogue. But because, and I think, you know, one of the things we want to talk about was the dialogue, it is very razor thin. I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as you guys did, but it was really funny and it is really heartfelt and it's a fun movie. It's, you know, but there was just stuff that maybe didn't quite work as well for me, which is a shame because, I mean, it's got all the stuff I like. Like, this isn't a true knock. It's just, you know, your tastes go one way or another, I think, you know.
No, I understand completely. You know, one thing I was really thinking about when I was trying to figure out how we would discuss this is, for one thing, for instance, I think there's a conversation. The first thing we should talk about is parody versus camp, because Roger Ebert, who is my hero as far as film criticism, he loved good films, he loved trash, he was a very eloquent writer. He didn't like this movie at all, and I actually believe that Roger Ebert misread the film, because he took the film as something we've always often complained about with things like, I don't know, some of the cheap films made for the Sci-Fi Channel that are deliberately bad. So he took this as sort of camp and of a certain kind, where the movie is intended to be bad. You're supposed to laugh at it being bad, and I don't think that's what this is at all. To me, this is very well made. It's just a well made replica of what it is, you know. And like, especially when it comes to that dialogue, nothing as clever as this dialogue was ever in those original movies. The jokes, the funniness of the dialogue comes from listening to the bizarre, poor dialogue of old movies and then writing funny jokes out of them, which is different from just writing bad dialogue and saying, you know, hey, look how bad our dialogue, because this is not bad dialogue. This is good dialogue.
But
you know,
well, maybe that's part of it though. I'm not in agreement with Roger Ebert, but I am. Part of it is, hey, that dialogue in those old movies was stupid. I'm going to write clever dialogue that sounds like that weird overwrought dialogue, but I'm going to try to be clever about it. And not try to be. I mean, it is clever. It's just, I think because all of the dialogue is like that, it struck me as the way that why I'm not maybe the perfect Buffy consumer, because a lot of times at some point I just go, no one is that witty all the freaking time. Like, I cannot stand that everything you say throughout the day is a quip of some sort.
Yes.
And in fact, if you had friends who actually talked that way, you would want to murder them. Like,
right.
You would just be like, I cannot be around these people. Like, every single thing, like, you know, it'd be like, or like hanging out with the genie from Aladdin. Like, you may want to hang out with Robin Williams, but why would you want to hang out with the genie from Aladdin? Like, it would just be crazy. Like, you would never want to do that.
But
I felt like this.
That is how it is to hang out with actors and comedians, is that they always are trying to perform. So I think it would be annoying to you, but it is a thing.
I mean, I hang out with, you know, people all the time. There's live action people and comedians that I know, and it's, you know, it's not like that.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I mean, and people have made the same complaint about The West Wing, which is that The West Wing is wall to wall clever, clever quips from Aaron Sorkin, and you know, people have made that complaint about The West Wing, is that it can be exhausting to listen to because every line is a joke of sorts, you know, and You know, maybe that's fair, maybe it's not, but it's like it's a watching that sort of is much more in your face about, hey, pay attention to how great our dialogue is here. I mean, in this case, I think
Well, I
the
guarantee you that Larry Blamire would be happy to be compared to Joss Whedon and Aaron Sorkin.
that's probably true.
I think he'd
That
be very happy with that.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
I think like it's a funny script and it's a good script, but for me
yeah,
personally, it relies a little bit too much for me on remember how bad that dialogue from that era was. Here's more like that. In fact, the whole thing is that.
the whole thing is that.
When even during that time period, you would get an occasional like good line.
Sure.
And the difference also is you often had maybe not so great actors who had to perform weird sci-fi lines. And in this, you have like good actors who are told to perform these lines as like that were written based on the delivery of 50s, not maybe, you know, arguably good or bad stuff, but constantly. And that's what takes me, that's what did it for me. As opposed to like Parody I like Metalocalypse has enough stuff that's just and I'm just naming that because a lot of friends of mine got mad because it's, you know, parodies metal and stuff. But the guy loved metal, but there's enough straight stuff there that it makes the funnier stuff funnier.
What was
I would compare this to more, though, is something. It reminds me a lot of actually like Venture Brothers, where it's like you can like like they're kind of, you know, it has this very sort of satirical.
Yeah, but even Venture Brothers
material.
Yeah, but even Venture Brothers isn't a constant parody of Johnny Quest. There's enough
No, it's
straight
not.
stuff.
But like you can tell they. Well, first of all, I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, we're comparing TV series where you have a lot more time to develop. Like, there's more breathing room on a TV series because you know you have more than one episode. Than
let's step back for
a movie.
For just a moment.
I want to say this.
Yeah.
You can tell, like, I really don't think this was coming from a snide place. Like, I
don't think so either.
That.
I don't think so at all. Like, I don't think it's snide. I think there's a lot of clever stuff, and I think it comes from a place of love. Like, there's a lot of great stuff in the movie. By no means am I saying this is bad or I didn't enjoy it. My thing was, it just felt, again, the constant reminder of this is supposed to be a bad sci-fi movie from the 50s when they weren't trying to make bad sci-fi movies. They were just trying to make cheap movies.
That's a good point.
And that's what, like...
But this is more of a parody, I think, of stuff like I Was a Teenage Werewolf than say, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, which was a bigger budget movie.
Although, if you get to The Creature Walks Among Us, you're getting closer to the kind of sort of tossed off potboiler that we're talking about, where everything
but still has a lot more money than something that, like, say,
True.
like the giant claw or you know, like
I mean, it's closer to like the sci-fi movies. You know, it's closer to any of those sci-fi movies where there's like kind of office chairs of the time period in a cockpit random
Well, and they genuinely did that here because they actually did just grab things that were in the cabin they were filming. And so, for example, they or around their house. So, for example, for the high-tech glasses that they're supposedly drinking out of in the spaceship, it's actually just like candle holders that they had in their house, or you know, like they're eating the mashed potatoes that they just had in the cabin. Like they did that. They actually did do that. They made props out of caulk guns and toilet paper tubes. So they actually did just do what they could to make it a cheap.
That is something that I'd like to call attention to.
This was a real low budget movie too.
Yeah,
like, that's the thing. Like, this wasn't a high budget. Like a lot of the movies that try to parody low budget movies are strangely high. But like, if you look at something, I mean, it's not a perfect analogy because they're parodying stuff from the 70s. But if you look like something like Machete, which is like a parody of like exploitation movies from the 70s, that movie has a big budget, but it's trying to look low budget. This movie was low budget, so it looks low budget. Like, to the point where you have characters wearing the same clothes for days.
Oh, sure.
But I want to give the people, the listeners who have not seen this film, an example. So I'm going to read you some quotes from the IMDb.
Let's get
so they can tell what the dialogue actually is.
Yeah.
Because I think it's hysterical. So like for here we've got Ranger Brad, who when we met him, he said, "Gosh, I sure hope somebody comes along so I can do my ranger job or whatever." And then like somebody comes right then and goes, "I'm needing help." And he's like, "That's what I'm here for." Anyway, Ranger Brad says, "Well, again, I didn't mean to throw a damper. Believe me, that's the last thing I'd like to throw. I don't want to throw anything at all, really. But when folks are horribly mutilated, I feel like it's my job to tell others. We take our horrible mutilations seriously up in these parts." Betty says, "I'm sure you do. Honey, the ranger's just doing his job." And Dr. Paul Armstrong says, "Of course he is. I'm sorry, Ranger Brad. I guess all this talk of horrible mutilation has me on edge." Ranger Brad responds, "That's all right, Dr. Armstrong. This horrible mutilation has a whole lot of people on a whole lot of edges." And I think that's brilliant. I love that because it's like, it's so perfect that you know exactly what it's poking fun at, but it makes it's funnier than what when it's poking fun at.
Okay, here's my favorite exchange. Crowbar and Lattice, the aliens are talking. And Crowbar says, "Yes, it is different, this Earth, as it is called, but then are we of the planet Marva, as we call our planet, not also strange and different to this planet and its people also?" And she says, "You think the Earth people think we are strange, you think? It is the strange how the ways of different people on different planets differ."
Yeah, and that one definitely is kind of over the top, just poking. And also the fact that they keep saying,
How
"Oh
is
well,"
that any different than watching like Young Frankenstein?
Oh no, it's an excellent
right,
point.
or
Uh,
airplane,
so
or airplane.
so
I thought of airplane.
Yeah. I should mention, by the way, I want to bring up a line from the brain from Planet Eros. This is a line delivered by the always reliable John Agar. And you've heard this before, but he goes, "I will return to my planet Eros, and through its vast intellect will become master of the universe. After I'm gone, your Earth will be free to live out its miserable span of existence as one of my satellites. And that's how it's going to be." I I've always loved that, especially since it keeps showing up in techno music. But
Well,
there's
and then
a
also I enjoyed the Conehead style thing of the aliens, where they don't know how not to be aliens, so they, like what they decide to copy the people that they're eating dinner with,
oh
and,
that actually
but they're copying Animala, who has been created from animals, so she doesn't know how to eat like a person either. So she just sticks her face in her food, and so then the aliens do it. And it's just exactly like a Coneheads thing, or when they say,
yeah,
like,
that
Keith
whole
Crowbar
gag
says,
actually
"Sorry,
got
sometimes my wife forgets she's not an alien from outer space."
the
Yeah.
that whole, and let's save the getting back to the dinner. Um, so okay, dialogue. Yes, Tony's point is it is the main joke, and it truly is the main joke of this movie. So maybe they lean on it too hard, but it is the thing that you'd run away with from the thing. I also thought the music in this film was really interesting because it's library music. And I don't know, like, if Tony, if you and I were to like set out to go make a low budget film, I don't really know who you'd go to today to get library music like this. I'm sure it's available.
No,
Yes.
there's a ton of services. In
So
fact, that's part of why, like, I started making some music. There's some various music that I've done at my job where we tried to create something because what happened was they got some library music and then another show had the same library music, which
Oh,
is a huge faux pas. So like, maybe we do like having you guys do something. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of services now. Like,
but he's
and you can even,
deliberately
update your own stuff, upload your own stuff, and, try to sell, here's some cool guitar riffs, or here's some jazz, or whatever.
to be used and right in somebody's film. In this case, he's gone out of his way to choose incidental music that sounds like it would have been. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much, but it seems quite deliberate. All this music that he's chosen sounds like you'd find it in a 1950s movie. And it's the
No, I'm
same.
totally down with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's pretty
it's
amazing.
like the fact it's all library music. That's actually 'cause you have to wade through a bunch. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean, all of it felt in the period for sure, or
yeah.
felt like it should be. If you're gonna make a parody of this stuff, get the stuff that sounds almost just like it, and that's really cool.
There's
Because
a
I do like whenever I see something, for example, there'll be somebody will do a video and they're like, oh, this is 8-bit or 16-bit. Like, being a nerd about video games,
mhm.
if it'll be like, I've seen one video that was like this mixture of like everything from Atari to like PCs from the 80s. When it said like, oh, it's Nintendo 8-bit, you can research that and make it look like that,
Mm.
and that's more authentic. So the music, oh, definitely, like, and if you're going to commit to it, I don't remember the soundtrack like every bit of it, but it certainly never felt too modern or was out of place to me, and that's something I would, definitely listen for. So yeah, no, that was really good.
There's a thing that TV tropes goes into, and I can't remember what the word they use for it, but in parody, one of the dangers you often have is that you don't know the actual tropes of what you're parodying, so you wind up with
Mm-hmm.
a bad version. And you and I, we talked about this regarding, I don't know, I guess it was about slasher movies, and we were saying the problem is a lot of parodies of slasher movies don't actually know slasher movies that well, so you kind of make up stuff to parody. And this is the opposite of that. Stuff like how that library music gets used, and like how how ray guns are built, and or you know how plot points will disappear, is done from a place of just extreme awareness of how you would have handled
Absolutely.
different challenges like this. I'm always shocked whenever I see a parody and I go, well, these guys haven't actually researched this stuff, and it makes the jokes not necessarily work as well. Or the same is true of somebody mentioned Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein actually knew those movies really well. Did Drew, did Mel Brooks actually write Young Frankenstein himself?
Gene Wilder wrote the initial draft, and then he co-wrote it with Young Frankenstein, with Mel Brooks, and they both are big fans of the Universal movies, especially Mel Brooks, who, if you ever see him interviewed, will talk at length about seeing the original Frankenstein as a young man. So like that was definitely, I think still is like the benchmark of parody, especially in like recreating a look of something. Tony is right, I think, to say like that the film grade issue is the one thing that keeps this from looking as authentic as it possibly could.
Could you technically do it, like if you decided to throw, let's say money was no object, could you take this movie and create a grainy, less defined,
Yeah, because
gauzier
that
look
bothered me too.
Oh
to
yeah,
make it?
you could do it. You can do that digitally, but I don't know if it would be better than what's here, considering it was video. I mean, also you're talking about, a lot of stuff is ruined for me because I'm used to seeing tiny thumbnails and looking for animation and looking for defects and stuff like that. I'm not the average person, not better, but just that's part of my job, right? So it's the same as if you were working environmental, you're an environmental scientist and you watch like Geostorm or something. You're just going to be like, whoa, none of that's the thing, right? So there are digital things, and they have improved vastly. But the true way to get it is to try to get some facsimile of that film stock and do that. You can come up with something that's pretty good now, and it's gotten way cheaper. But when it was filmed, maybe not. I think Wade talked about it. Like the thing that bugs me is, for example, and this is totally stupid. This is not average by any stretch, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. Something that bugs me is I can spot when people make digital static from a program, as opposed to filming a TV that has static on it. It looks a certain way because it's an algorithm to make static. And I grew up when TV shut off, you saw static, right? Or like if you see Poltergeist, that's TV static.
Yes, indeed.
I've seen fake static that they create using, After Effects or you name it, Houdini, whatever you're using for compositing software. And 99% of people won't even, like, A, who cares? And B, like, you're not going to, like, it looks good enough for, like, most people. But to somebody who has, that looks that way, it pulled me out of it. And that's dumb. I wish I could turn that part of my brain off because it makes some movies, like, it pulls me out. And I'm like, why did I have to worry about that? Stupid brain. Like, why do you care? Can't you turn that off? But, so stuff like that. But I think, you're making a movie and you're putting something out there. First and foremost, that should be the thing. And if you can do the other stuff, that's awesome. Like, I don't think you should have not made this movie because he couldn't make the film grain right. That's crazy.
No.
But it's what you can do given your budget, and that would have been awesome. I think it would have kind of solidified it. But would it have made the one of the rules that I usually try to follow? Would it have made it twice as good or 1.5 times as good? I doubt it.
No,
it's an effective parody.
Yeah, I can do, because it's exactly like what happens when SNL does a parody of something in black and white. It's just it's just on video, and then maybe sometimes they'll run a filter that creates little like scratches on
Sure.
the film. But other than that, generally this is what it looks like. Here's the funny thing: if you look at like episodes of the Twilight Zone that were shot during the season that they shot on videotape, you get this same look because they were using videotape. And video is just always higher res, and the big thing that you can tell from these older films is that they're just not that slick and clean. That's the thing that gives it away. But whatever. As you point out, the movie's not intended to fool you. You know the moment it starts that this is not a real movie from the 50s, so it's okay.
Although the opening credits is a pretty good approximation.
No, those were good. Those were really, I remember, those were really, really good. I dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. The other thing I was thinking of is you look at like low budget films. I was watching Without Warning the other day, which is a terrible alien invasion movie by Graydon Clark, and watchable. It's kind of fun because I think he's trying to make a scary alien movie. It can be dumb from moment to moment, but I way prefer that Larry Blamire is doing this than that. I prefer that he's such a goofball that he's going, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to take $100,000 and get my friends together and make a perfect version of an old black and white movie.
And have you mentioned that he wrote it, directed it, and stars as Paul Armstrong?
Yes.
And as the skeleton?
Yeah. I mean,
he plays
do what
skeleton.
you can do to make a film,
God, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we should start with the Armstrongs if we're going through the cast list, obviously. So what's interesting here is that Larry Blamire plays Dr. Armstrong, who is here in the valley to do science, and Faye Masterson plays Betty Armstrong, his long-suffering housewife. And
no, she doesn't suffer. She adores him.
Okay, well, yes. Anyway,
she suffers through science.
His adoring housewife who is a widow to science, or a housewife. She says something about that, about she's married to science. I just love how goofy these characters are. Their constant sort of patter about how he's too obsessed with doing science, and that there's never even any like suggestion about what kind of science he's doing. Later on, he says he's a
meteographer.
Meteographer. Yes, indeed.
Not a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He says, he does explain. He goes,
I mean, that's the thing is, by no means are my complaints or reticent about how how they hit you over the head with it, to detract from all of the really good dialogue like that there is.
I don't
that whole there's a bunch of exchanges like that which are really
it's
pretty darn good.
Yeah. Well, like she says, at one point she says moons, teaspoons, that's all gibberish to me, I'm afraid. And another point she goes, well, I suppose if I had wanted a safe life, I wouldn't have married a man who studies rocks. I just love that.
There's this wonderful line where Blamire as Dr. Armstrong says, I have this written down. Do you realize the whole plot, by the way, of the movie is that a meteor has come down, and the Armstrongs, one is a scientist, one is his wife, are going to find the meteor because Paul thinks that it has atmospherium. 2 aliens have landed, and they want the atmospherium for their ship. And we're going to meet another mad scientist who wants the atmospherium so he can bring the fabled Lost Skeleton of Cadavra back to life and thereby rule the Earth or something. But anyway, Dr. Armstrong says, do you realize what this meteor could mean to science? If we find it, and it's real, it can mean a lot. It could mean actual advances in the field of science. That's delightful. Okay, so I want to point out that the gender roles here are it's funny how just trapped in the 50s the gender roles are, and I know this is on purpose, but it's wonderful because it kind of reminds you, the movie reminds you over and over again that in the gender roles of these films from the 50s, the wives always just sort of stand behind the man, in a way, like just like when we meet the aliens, Crowbar and Lattice are married. Lattice, they have a traditional wife and husband sort of arrangement. There's
Although she does not
yeah,
clean up messes because they have gotten rid of messes eons ago.
yes, that's true. Yeah,
Which I actually want to know from Larry Blamire, because you guys are going to interview him. How did they get rid of the messes? Because I'd like to try to do that. So if he knows, then please
Yes.
let me
Maybe
know.
they disintegrate the messes. Like it just.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm really hoping that that's what it
Yeah,
is.
like-
Maybe they
and
transform the
that's
messes into something less messy.
yes.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the mutant comes from. Because
it.
yes,
Yeah.
It's just a collection of messes. That's pretty good.
Crowbar
theory,
and
good theory.
Lattice. Crowbar and Lattice are the aliens. They have come to Earth. They've crash landed on Earth with their pet mutant. Yeah, it's never explained what manner of mutant this is, what it is mutated from. It is a mutant that is just their word for monster, and it's they keep it as a pet. And it has gotten free and just started killing people. And so they've got two problems. They need to get this atmospherium meteor, and they also need to find their mutant, because otherwise it will be out
Probably
horribly.
the mutant, actually, now that I think about it, is the one who cleans up the messes. Like, he eats the messes.
Probably.
And that's why she needs him.
They keep it as a pet. So so
It's like how we had when we had dogs, we didn't worry about cleaning up food that fell on the floor because the dogs would get it. And then once our dogs passed away, we were like, wait, there's food on the floor.
Yes. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Andrew Parks and Susan McConnell play Crowbar and Lattice, and they are I mean, I think it's remarkable how everybody knows what's going on in this thing. Faye Masterson gives the performance, as Betty. She has the most sort of, oftentimes she has both really crazy 1950s housewife sort of lines, like, gosh, mister, not if you're coming home with me, or whatever, but also the most sort of sometimes loopy, funny stuff. The aliens are hilarious. I mean, they're just really wonderful, and they're the ones who are doing most of what Julia calls the conehead humor, which is basically they're pretending that they're not aliens, and these are the scenes with the aliens are the ones where the movie is, I think, funniest and also the farthest from its source material, because they're so great, and especially the dinner scene, which is at the center of the whole film. And I don't even want to spoil it all, but it's a very clever scene, because it's just two aliens having dinner with two normal people and pretending to be normal people, except for that what they don't know is that one of the guests is
three normal people,
Yeah.
and a cat animal person.
Right, a cat in a human
made
body.
up of 4 animals.
I'm a mad scientist. Let's be real.
Yeah.
I'm not a normal person.
Yes, I guess that's true.
True, I guess, yeah.
So yeah, also
and a eavesdropping skeleton.
yes.
Eavesdropping telepathic skeleton.
Yeah,
at
the
dinner.
deal with the skeleton is that evil mad scientist Roger Fleming, which is such an everyday name, but evil mad scientist Roger Fleming has climbed up to the lost cave, whatever it is, to find the skeleton, which is just laying there like under a tarp. And he does some science and semi-resurrects it, and then it begins to order him around and says, "Go get me some atmospherium," which luckily just came down in a meteor nearby, because bring it back and I'll be able to resurrect myself. And so he's going to do this. He's this guy Brian Howe, actually, he's in a lot of movies. He shows up all over the place.
Yeah.
Certainly the Pursuit of Happiness. Gosh, I don't know. His face is very familiar, and you see him show up, a lot in supporting roles.
Mm-hmm.
The interplay between him and the skeleton and the way the skeleton just berates him is probably my favorite thing about this movie. The skeleton's just like, shut up! It's like
Yes.
he's so mean to this
He's
guy.
like, but skeleton, how will I find the meteor?
Skeleton.
And the skeleton's like, that is something like, that is for you to know. I sleep now. And then, just goes silent. But yes. The Mr. Fleming, Dr. Fleming, I'm sorry. He went to evil mad scientist school, so he's Dr. Fleming.
Yeah.
Dr. Fleming needs that meteor, and then for help, what he does is he steals the transmogrifier or whatever it's called that the aliens carry and points it at some woodland creatures and creates a 1950s cat dancer. He creates a woman creature called Animala, who is really, truly a delightful just invention of this
Played
movie.
by the real life wife of Larry Blamire, Jennifer Blair, and they're still married 20 years later. They've been married 20 years now.
Well, good for them. Also tough.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah. So she's wearing basically a ballet outfit, and she just kind of slinks around and talks like a cat. You know, she'll go rawr. That is her. Most of her lines. Rawr. Rawr. And yeah, it's a wonderful character. This is one of those things that's really impossible to describe in a way that sounds like it would work as well as it does. People should see it though.
Yeah.
Just to see
well, she
what
seems like, you know, she's a cross between one of the cat women on the moon and well, honestly, more Eartha Kitt in the old Batman.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
right.
But you're right about Catwomen on the Moon. They also wore the leotards, you know, and you know, and she has like claws and stuff like that. Towards the end of the movie, she has developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you're gonna say. Good.
Well, she develops the power of speech because Dr. Fleming has to quickly tutor her in.
He creates her because he needs a date.
Right. He wants to get into the dinner party
So
with the Armstrongs so that he can figure out a way to steal the meteor from them. And so he teaches her basic etiquette, you know, and such as the extremely important advice, always agree, which is just remarkable. And so she actually reads that line.
And very ditzy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What I thought you were gonna say, Jason, is that she suddenly develops like claws that she didn't have. Like first she has hands and then she has claws, which makes me laugh that she just these like fuzzy mitts kind of just appear halfway through.
Yes.
So that's the other thing I love is that this movie also decides to just add in random continuity stuff like that, you know.
Yes.
Because that's perfect.
Because it's not a problem, right? Absolutely. That does get us to that dinner scene, which again I don't want to spoil all of it just because it's not as funny just to narrate it through. But the dinner scene is the best part of the entire film, where all the characters come to have dinner together, and you know, everybody is not quite understanding one another. Especially the conceit is that Dr. Armstrong will continue just talking blithely with whoever he is having a conversation with, no matter how bizarre their responses. So he'll continually say things to the aliens. They'll say something in response that makes no sense at all, and he'll just look at them and then just continue talking. And that's a wonderful gag. I mean, it's really good. There's one point where he goes, well, you know, maybe you know, maybe your wife, he's talking to the alien, maybe your wife can show my wife where she bought, you know, what store the dress came from. And they're confused by the question. And then Crowbar says, my wife does not like to talk about a store. And they both just stare for a moment.
Well,
It's wonderful.
but the great thing about the wife is that she's actually super into the dress because this is the first time she's had a dress like that. So she's always touching it and looking at it. And she's like, she calls it, what does she call it? Like a funnel, upside down funnel. What does she call it? She calls it
cloth funnel.
a cloth funnel.
Yes.
Yeah. So she's like, yes, I too like my cloth funnel, and she just touches herself. So like
I want to acquire many cloth funnels.
So funny. And so she's like, oh, you're talking about shopping? Yes. Okay.
and what that brings us to, we do have a couple of characters left. Animala, like I said, is probably the greatest creation here. Then you've got your minor characters who are all, well, Ranger Brad and the farmer, who are just minor characters who come and go to deliver inane dialogue and push the plot along, and the mutant. The
I
mutant,
do.
yeah,
I do really like. I enjoy, and I think I can picture this in a comic book almost more than in the movie. Is the farmer's directions about going through all these horribly named places.
yes,
You know, you
yes,
go
absolutely,
here, and then it's actually really that was really good. Where and I think the doctor said something like, "Oh, that sounds really dangerous." Like, well, there's a lot of superstitions around here. He just kind of plays
yes,
it off, and none of it sounds like places you'd want to go. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's listed
he
here.
takes you
It's
through
in
all
the
of
IMDb.
them.
It says,
Yeah, it's
stay on
really
this
great.
road here, past Dead Man's Curve. You'll come to an old fence called the Devil's Fence. From there, go on foot till you come to a valley known as the Cathedral of Lost Soap. Smack in the center is what they call Forgetful Milkman's Quadrangle. Stay right on the path of Staring Skulls, and you come to a place called Death Clearing. Cabin's right there. Can't miss it.
The death,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
I like the Devil's Fence. That's
Yes.
for some reason. That level of absurdity. There's a lot of great bits like that. Like that stuff works for me pretty well.
The finale of the film involves oh well, I'm sorry, before we do that we should talk about the mutant. So the mutant is a classic creature. There are worse creatures in classic low budget
Oh
sci-fi
yes,
than this mutant,
definitely.
for sure.
No, I
I
love his
mean,
costume. I actually want that costume.
the eye creatures, for instance, way worse than this. This suit was put together. I don't know how. It's made of felt, probably. It's got like 3 giant eyes and long claws, and the mutant develops a thing for Betty, and she
Oh, the
actually
way a
report.
vintage monster would.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
She
absolutely.
also is super into him.
she goes, he looked into my eyes the way nobody had ever looked in my eyes before, if I'm recalling correctly, something like that. And Dr. Armstrong says, gosh, Betty, it sounds like you like the mutant. And she goes,
What?
can anybody like a mutant? I wonder. There's
And then when she's back with the mutant again, she's doing all these poses and like showing off her leg and stuff.
sure.
It's super funny.
That's when they determined that they need to lure the mutant to into the wedding ceremony that the
The
Lost
battle,
Skeleton.
the Lost Skeleton.
Right, because the Lost Skeleton has basically managed to hypnotize Crowbar and Lattice, and he wants to marry Lattice in a ceremony, and this is when everything begins to
Which-
go foul for the Lost Skeleton's brilliant plan.
One of the biggest laughs I have in this movie is when because he's gonna marry her, he puts a skeleton, like
Yes.
it's like a skeleton hood over her, so she has
Oh,
a
yeah.
skull.
That was pretty good. Like
That's-
because it's a great reveal. I feel bad like spoiling because so much of comedy is based on those like classic reveals. So
Yes.
it's too late to tell you spoilers, but. But
we
yeah,
say
no, that
we
was-
say
that was-
spoilers
that
over
was
the top.
pretty-
It
Right,
is
right. But
quite
just in
difficult
general in
discussing
it.
it's hard to discuss a comedy because the problem is the stuff that makes you laugh the most are jokes, and so you're exactly right. You're like, gosh, I hate to like spoil these jokes, and so I promise, if you're listening to this show and you haven't seen this thing yet, hopefully we haven't spoiled all the jokes, and you can just pretend that you don't remember any of them, and then go watch them. But yes, the mutant manages to get all the way to the wedding, and that at the same time, Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Fleming fight. Dr. Fleming loses, and so that brings the wrath of the skeleton on him for not properly protecting him. And the skeleton
Yeah.
strangles Dr. Fleming. That leaves basically the mutant to attack the skeleton, and they have
And then it becomes
huge
like
battle.
Godzilla versus whoever,
Yes. Yeah, the skeleton and the
Right.
mutant fight, and you have to see that fight to believe it, because it mainly involves the mutant sort of carrying the skeleton towards a cliff, and And then the skeleton is dispatched because he tries to mind control the mutant. He's like, "Obey me," and Dr. Armstrong says something to the effect of, "You can't control a mutant because they don't have the mental capacity," or something like that. And that's and then as often happens in films, once everything's wrapped up, oh, they don't keep Animala. If it had been up to me, that would have kept Animala, but they instead turn Animala back into 4 different woodland creatures,
Because
and
those poor woodland creatures' families miss them. They need to be back with their families.
that
Sure.
must be it. Yes.
And their feelings are definitely more important than going to a dinner party.
Yes.
Exactly.
Dr. Paul says. He says something like,
Selfishly.
"I think I'm going to miss Animala," and Mrs. Armstrong says something like, "Well,
Hopefully not when you're coming home with me.
Mister." She's always calling it
Yeah.
Mister. These guys paper
And then
over.
everybody laughs. My favorite thing, and I kept doing it along with them because I knew it was coming, but I still thought it was hilarious, is when everybody would go, I love that. It's
Yes.
just delightful to me.
Yeah, no, and oh well, the deployment of the word
Oh,
oh well at the end of asking a question that there is no answer for in this script, because to get an answer would be to probably poke a hole somehow or another in the plot. And so they'll ask a question like, "Why did the mutant just go away?" And then they'll say, "Oh well," and that's it. So it's a strange conversation to have about this. I have made you guys sit through some really bizarre films, such as The Zombies of Moratau and Escape and Embrace of the Vampire. This film almost defies talking about, because talking about it really amounts to just reciting bits of it that you love. Having said
But
that,
honestly, the fact that this
yeah.
is a comedy, I think, makes it a lot more straightforward. Than actually talking about some weird old B movie, because
Right.
comedy is kind of I think you would have a lot easier time getting somebody to watch this than actually getting them to watch The Zombies of Moratau. Strangely enough,
That's
because
probably
it's
true.
funny.
And thank God, because I mean, I'd rather that people watch. I truly would. But at the same time, the thing is, a movie like Zombies of Moratau tells you something about what the state of film at the time and what people thought was a reasonable thing to put up on a movie screen. Whereas a movie like this, it asks different questions. Like why did Larry Blamire think that this was something that he should be doing? Or is it a matter of, you love this art, you're fascinated by this old art, and you're like, by gum, I'm going to make something
Well,
that sort of encapsulates what I feel about it.
And to get myself ready for this podcast, the thing is like there's a sequel to this, which has more money put into it, for one, and is almost more of a parody of like 60s dinosaur movies in
Yes.
a way. But it's also, again, and then he has another movie called Dark and Stormy Night, which I'll talk more about later. That's a 1930s old dark house film, and it's like, so all of this guy's films, obviously he loves old movies, because all of his films are recreation of old movies. And as someone who likes old movies, it's almost nice to get like more of the thing that you like, even if it's done in a tongue-in-cheek way.
Well, we talked about, why would Seth MacFarlane think that the thing that's most important for me, Seth MacFarlane, right now to make is an 8th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Right.
But by gum, that's what he did. He's like, I'm going to do that.
Which again goes, I think talking about that kind of goes back to why I'm so on the fence. Like, the thing that worked for me is so he's done a really good job of doing that. Whereas a lot of, especially new Family Guy, like for the past several seasons, like watching after a while, rely on, remember that thing? That was a thing.
Yeah.
Or, haha, that was stupid. Even if you like that, like, that was a dumb thing. Remember the thing?
Yes.
It's not that the reference even isn't even as important as, do you remember, and you just name a reference and just throw it out
like the
there.
Chris Farley sketch from Saturday Night Live, when he would go, that was awesome. That was the only whole gag.
Yeah, but that's part of originally why I didn't watch the Orville is like, well, the other stuff he does doesn't really speak to me. If it speaks to you, cool. If you like it, that's great. It just wasn't for me. And then I watched it, was like, oh, okay. And in fact, the comedy bits that are in it aren't always as good as the actual just like, we're just making Next Generation. Here you go.
Yeah.
And that's often better than some of the comedy, which is kind of his part and parcel. In general, you hire him to write a comedy thing.
Well, and the Orville is funny, but it's not. But it doesn't lose the awesomeness of Next Generation in making fun of it.
Right, but I think as it became a little less comedic, because I felt like kind of didn't exactly know where it was, because you don't want it to be like Quark, which is old, and that's a reference that probably almost no one will get. I mean, I barely caught an episode when I was young. When I was out, I think I maybe saw 2 episodes, barely memorable. But that comedy is not really funny at the time, and it has no reference. It's just that's comedy at the time. Maybe it's not that funny.
The thing with the Orville is he clearly wanted to make season 8 Next Generation, and the devil's bargain that he made is, but I got to put jokes in it because that's how I'm going to get away with all this.
That's why you hire him. I mean, that's why you hire him. And
then as the season went along, they just forgot to leave the jokes in. I mean, but by the time you got to the end of the season, there were no more jokes in that show than there were on the actual Next Generation. And they've even said for the next season, there's going to be less jokes, which I'm fine.
Right.
I'm fine with, because you can keep making Next Generation as long as you want, as far as I'm concerned. I liked Star Trek when it had overhead lighting. That was pretty awesome. So I'm down. If he's around for four seasons, I'll be totally happy. But
but it does. That's the thing is this film doesn't have as much of that. But it is the fine line, like, oh, are we going down this kind of overly long skit? Or, but for me, usually it brings it back around to something really clever. And obviously, everyone involved enjoys the things that it's parodying. This isn't some grudge. Like, I saw one of those movies one time. It was stupid. It'd be funny to laugh at it and poke fun at it, like point at it and laugh as it comes by, push it into a locker or whatever. Like, This isn't that at all.
It's not a bully movie.
A love for it. Yeah. But I've seen where people do that. And we were talking about earlier. Like, have you seen these movies? Well, no, I know of them, and I want it's funny this way.
Shallow parody.
That's not this movie at all. There's a lot more behind the scenes. Going into this.
There's thought. There is definitely.
It's not shoddy.
One of the complaints people have made about things like the the Scary Movie series and stuff like that is that some of the gags are not even gags; they're just recreations. So it's like, hey, we're going to do a bit now where we recreate something from another film.
Usually,
but there's no actual joke. There's more like the assumption that the audience will recognize something and laugh out of recognition, which does get you a little ways, but that's about it.
Sure.
And it gets old. There's a danger in this movie. Thank God this movie's 90 minutes long, because all these gags, you can't really get much more than 90 minutes out of it. It's just really, really hard. That's also true, I have to say, of the source material. Usually, a lot of times these movies, by the time you're getting to like the middle of the second act, there's a lot of like running down long corridors and like crossing back and forth along the same fields, because a lot of times there's not enough plot to spread through the film.
Or budget.
Or budget. Absolutely. We should mention that this movie is filmed in what is it, Bronson Canyon? It's Griffin Park, if I recall.
Bronson Canyon.
Which is a place that a lot of these movies were shot. The thing about Bronson Canyon is it's right in Los Angeles, really. So it's just very, very close, and it's a perfect place to film. I presume that they filmed there today. And that you could go and get the rights to take your crew out there and use this cave. They could use that cave forever. This is the
Bat Cave.
It was the Bat Cave. Yes, it was the entrance to the Batcave. So
So
I don't
this
know.
is like the version of all the like kung fu slash Sentai things where it's like, hey, do you like quarries? Because we can rent
Yes,
that quarry, and all like, oh, quick, we cut to the fight, and the fight is just in this random,
the fight's in a
canyon
rock
slash
quarry.
probably a quarry.
Well, and you know how Star Trek was often taking place on alien planets that looked a lot like parks. This is
Right.
one of the locations, and I'm trying to remember the
Sure.
name of the other location that Star Trek used a lot. The Vasquez Rocks. That's it, which is also
Oh
in
yeah.
Los Angeles. That's the place that Kirk often fought around the Vasquez Rocks. So, yes, let's get. I mean, we should definitely wrap this up. But I want to get our final thoughts, and then we'll go around to endorsements. So, let's go, Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. Julia, is there anything we've missed in discussing the Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, and what are your final thoughts?
As far as whether there's anything we missed, I'm just kind of scanning the trivia on the IMDb because they always have some fun things. But there's not a whole lot here that we haven't already covered, so I don't think there's much there. No, I just think well, I did want to say one thing. Okay, that is this. I didn't feel like the makeup and the hair was right on the wife, on Mrs. Armstrong. Like, given that she's supposed to be so traditional and and June Cleavery or whatever, like a young June Cleaver before the kids. I think that wasn't quite right, and I would have liked to have seen her do more of a classic makeup and all that kind of thing. So that pulled me out just a little bit because I really wanted to believe. But I did think that the mores of the whole business of the obedient housewife and all that, I got a real kick out of seeing that played to absurdity, because you really do go, well, it seems absurd, but actually it's not too far off from how they actually were. So that part I got a big kick out of as well. And yeah, I think Animala is just a fantastic the actress, who again is the wife of the writer and director, was fantastic. She was so cute and fun and seductive and all the things she needed to be. So I wanted to give her a little bit more kudos because I don't think we talked enough about her. But yeah, it was a really fun movie, and I laughed a whole lot.
She danced like no woman ever danced before, is what Paul says. It sounds like you liked
True.
Animala, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Drew, final thoughts. Lost Skeleton of Cadavra.
I like this movie a lot. It was fun revisiting it, and then also discovering his other films, which I will talk more about when we get into endorsements. But I think if you like 50s horror and sci-fi films, I think that you'll like this movie. Unless you're just like not on board for them to be ribbed a little bit, But it's such an entertaining movie, and as Jason said, it's not very long. So like I think it's time well spent, and it's a really really funny movie.
Very good, very good. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Paul, going back through it with everyone, I remembered a lot more of the things I liked about it than things I didn't. I like I said, it's a razor thin line. I really enjoy parts of it. And I think there's great stuff here. Like, none of the bad stuff detracts from me, I would only watch it once or whatever. But it is that like I said, that razor thin line, and it's done from a place of love. Like, you can't make parody like this without loving the subject matter. It always will feel way disingenuous, and it will not turn out, especially for the budget that it had, it would not turn out as enjoyable as this is if there wasn't love and passion in there, for sure. Parts of the dialogue started for me to feel a little bit more like a sketch that is slightly too long.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, whenever that seemed, when I was a little antsy about just how it was being done, something would come up that was, made me laugh, would bring it back around and keep it going, And I liked it a lot. I would recommend it for sure. It's a lot of fun. Again, it's really about kind of where you're coming from, or your own personal stuff. I mean, I know somebody there's probably people who would be more like Roger Ebert, who's like, this is making fun of all the things I love, and it's not even, it's not as clever as it thinks or whatever, But for me, the writing is clever in a lot of ways in what it's poking fun at. Just sometimes it felt much for me personally.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that sometimes it runs dangerously close to being a skit that's gone on too long, and yet I keep thinking, these are my thoughts. It's such an interesting uh, accomplishment to make this
Yeah.
film, to say, I'm
It's
going to do
also,
it feature length. I'm going to do a feature length movie, that hits all these gags. Yes, Tony.
and it's not a cash grab.
Right.
Like you have to love this to make this. This
Yes.
isn't something where you're like, oh, I'm gonna, there's certain production companies now that make, an asylum film is an asylum film.
Yep.
They're going to make that. It's going to be this thing, and hopefully people will tweet about it or whatever. Especially during the time this was made. This is not that by any stretch. This is somebody going, I think this would be great, and I'm just going to make this thing. And if you're on board, cool. But there's no, you always hope that people will dig what you make, right? Or else why would you put the art out there? But this is, hey, I'm going to make this obscure thing based on obscure things and hope that people dig it. That's, for this amount of money, $100,000, it doesn't sound like a lot, but I guarantee you that's that's several salaries for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of money to have laying around just to make a movie.
You get it made. And you go out there and you do it because that's what you want to do. And for somebody to go, hey, I love this thing, I'm going to go out and make this, that's cool. That level of passion, you don't just do it. I don't think there was the expectation that it was going to be a blockbuster success, but that it was going to be a cool, fun thing that like-minded people would also enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a lot to be said for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially when you consider what you could be doing otherwise, what kind of dollars you could be chasing or whatever it is that you could be doing, but maybe a lot of times if you're an artist, you're like, I wish I could, but this is what I want to do. This is what I'm moved to do. I think Ebert, again, rest his soul, I think Ebert is just wrong. I think maybe he got up on the wrong side of the bed that day, or maybe he didn't live long enough to be aware of asylum movies and know what deliberately bad was, because I think he just misread the movie, and that's okay. Ebert was no angel, just like anybody else. He got things wrong from time to time.
Well, he also didn't like the Friday the 13th movies, so his.
Oh yeah,
right. Oh my gosh,
that.
This is the second week in a row when we've just sort of I don't know, attacked Roger Ebert, who is dead and cannot defend himself. But
any critic, because he was one of the few critics that I really did pay attention to, and even when I would disagree, which is as often as not,
it's bound to be a percentage of the time that you'll disagree. Even Gene Siskel disagreed half the time. That was the gag, in fact.
Yeah, and so, but the respect and way he did criticism was far beyond most critics.
Indeed.
So.
Oh, and by the way, I will never stop recommending Roger Ebert's books, or now you can just read all of his reviews online. I think he is still one of my all-time favorite critics, and the other critics who say that he wasn't as good as they are jealous. I'm sorry to say that, but it is true. There are a lot of really snooty critics who are like, people liked Roger, but and there's just this sort of weird snobbery that comes from just they don't like the fact that Roger Ebert became famous. Famous for being a film critic. That's right. Kind of an accomplishment. But but he got this one wrong, and I'm happy to say it. So.
That's your own critique.
Yeah.
There you go.
So my feeling, I wish I could draw a line in the movies that I've made you guys watch and make sense of them. What gathers Zombies of Morital and Lost Skeleton of Cadavra and Embrace of the Vampire that makes all of it make sense. I cannot make it make sense. But nevertheless, I am super glad that we watched this movie. Let's do endorsements. I'm curious what you guys have been watching, reading, listening to. No spoilers if it's going to be a current blockbuster in the theaters, at least in its first.
Julia.
So,
Whatever do you mean?
Yeah.
That was directed at me because my first endorsement has to be the new Avengers movie Infinity War, which was awesome. I am such a sucker for superhero movies, and for the other thing I'm a sucker for is caper and like caper things and things like that. So I'm actually going to skip over. I'm just going to say that I endorse Infinity War and not go into it any further than that because I don't want to spoil it for anybody. And go to my second endorsement, which is a show called Deception that is on gosh, I'm gonna get wrong which network it's on right now. But anyway, it's on prime time and you can check it out. And it is fun for anybody who is like me who just really likes magic and detective type things, because this is those two things. So basically it's Now You See Me meets like Psych or something. It's a fun, lighthearted kind of detective show with a magician who is now for some reason solving crimes instead of performing magic, but he's using magic to solve crimes. So it is a really fun show for anybody who is like I said, Now You See Me. If you like any of the Psych or any of those shows that are kind of people who just stumbled into being detectives, like Murder, She Wrote back in the day, and are now, and that, so it's a twist on the traditional detective story. I am really enjoying that show, so that's my second endorsement, and we can talk more about Infinity War once everyone has gotten to
Yes.
see it, and we
Once
want
we've
to.
all watched it, I have a feeling we will dedicate half of our show,
Yep.
either deliberately or accidentally, to discussing
Yeah,
that movie.
to that movie.
So,
Exactly.
It'll be a
Yeah.
repeat of when we had a impromptu
Yeah,
review,
Ready Player One.
Ready Player One.
Better play
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, all right, Drew, what do you have to endorse for us?
Well, as I said, to gear up for this episode, not that I actually talk about it too much, but I it'll help me when we do the interview in a couple of days. I watched all of Larry Blamire. Am I saying that right? Blamire?
Yeah.
Yeah, to my knowledge, yeah.
Well, I watched the rest of his films, which are readily available on Amazon Prime. I watched The Lost Skeleton Returns Again, which has
That's a pretty good title.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it starts out as like a parody of almost like one of the Creature from the Black Lagoon films, or what I call expedition horror. And then by the end of the movie, it becomes color and goes almost full Irwin Allen on us.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also a wonderful parody, and all the things that you like about this movie are tenfold in that one. In fact, it's got makeup effects by the guys that made Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So the monsters have these really bizarre look about them. But my favorite, actually, of his three movies is a movie called Dark and Stormy Night, which is a pitch perfect, barely a parody, just barely a parody of Old Dark House movies, like the Old Dark House or Dr. X, or there was a lot of semi-comedic versions of this thing, like Hold That Ghost, which is an Abbott and Costello movie, and stuff like that, which is basically a group of people are stuck in an old spooky mansion for whatever reason. Either their car broke down, which is of course what they parody in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or there's a reading of a will, and usually the mansion is haunted, or there's a murderer loose in it or something. But this movie, it has a lot of the same cast members from the Lost Skeleton movies, but this movie just recaptures that vibe so well. And also, Jennifer Blair is back, and she's a wisecracking girl reporter, and she's teamed up with Daniel Roebuck, who plays a wisecracking reporter himself, and they have like this sort of old screwball comedy, snappy patter between each other. And man, it is so good, and it made me so happy while while watching this movie. So if you like movies from the 30s, it was definitely my favorite of the three movies by him that I have now seen. Like I just it was one of those things that I watched it and I kind of immediately wanted to watch it over again because it just made me really, really, really happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You should check it out. It's called Dark and Stormy Night, and again, both that and Lost Skeleton, both of the Lost Skeleton movies. So you can have a little movie marathon. If you enjoy this podcast, then you can watch all three of them. They're all on Amazon Prime right now. My other endorsement is it's something that I've talked a lot about with David Bowles, who was on the show a lot when we were doing the library week thing earlier this week. Is the new version of Lost in Space, which is on Netflix, which I just really, really, really have been impressed by. A lot of the episodes are directed by Neil Marshall, who did The Descent and Dog Soldiers, and it has like a nice almost survivor horror tension to it, even though it is a family friendly sci-fi show. And I'm a big fan, long-time podcast listeners are aware that I'm a big fan of the Fantastic Four. Man, this show punches a lot of my Fantastic Four buttons with its sort of yay science retro futurism about it, and it's a really fun show, and I hope it gets another season because I just really dug the hell out of it.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Tony, what about you?
So because we were hanging out and saw it, I'm first
Oh, damn it. Are you going to endorse the same thing I'm going to endorse? Go ahead, please. Continue.
Dragon Lives Again?
Yes. So we'll just co-endorse it. You start talking.
I'll save that.
No.
That because I have two.
Yeah, okay.
So
we'll do it together.
The other one, along the lines of the movie we're talking about tonight, Phil Mucci, who I've talked about and we've interviewed. He's on our Facebook page. Done a bunch of really great videos. Really great dude. Loves horror. He did a Giallo style video for Huntress. Now he's turned that into, he's about to launch a campaign for Dr. Dario Bava, and it's parody / homage to Giallo and everything hammery that we enjoy. And I am super stoked because his cast is great, great people, and he's a super cool guy, so I should post, and you can sign up to get updates and stuff pre-Indiegogo. So I'm super stoked because I've seen production art and little bits here and there, and I know people who are involved in it. Ian McKay is a super cool dude, and I think it's just going to be great. So
what is the name of the Indiegogo?
It will be Dr.
Fundraiser?
Dario Bava, and my internet's acting weird, or I would give you all of it. I'll post it.
Okay.
But yeah, I have a feeling especially based on some of his 70s parody stuff, as well as his Huntress video, where this kind of sprung from. I think this is going to be really good.
Fantastic.
And it will be genuine as well. You don't make these things unless you love the things, and he's truly a fan, diehard, hardcore. This is what I'm steeped in kind of person. So I have high hopes.
Don't you love guys like that, honestly? Because you can just buy them a milkshake and just kind of let them go and just sort of listen. It can be really wonderful. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about your second endorsement because you know more about it, but I definitely watched it and it was the same thing I was going to endorse. So yes, tell us about the Dragon.
Well, yeah, Dragon Lives Again, a Bruceploitation film, and there's a documentary coming out about Bruceploitation films from, I believe, Severin Films, which is going to be great, and the people involved in that are awesome too.
Bruceploitation, which is the thing where people made movies about Bruce Lee after Bruce Lee died.
Right.
About is saying it strongly. People made movies that basically were just exploiting the memory of Bruce Lee, which is why they're called.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
And this one is one of the more insane ones. You can catch it on the Wu-Tang Collection channel on the Roku or on the YouTube channel for Wu-Tang Collection. which has all kinds of great stuff. I've talked about it off and on. This, Bruce Lee goes to hell, and they say he looks different because when you go, that's the underworld. He's not in hell yet. So when you transition to the underworld, you just look different. That's their and now we're doing this. Don't mind that this guy is a little stockier, doesn't quite have the same charisma, but here we go. And the cast of characters includes, on the friend side, Popeye and Kane from Kung Fu, and then the villains are The Exorcist, Clint Eastwood, James Bond, The Godfather, Emmanuel. Who else did I miss? I'm sure I'm missing somebody now that I think about it. But
there was one more person that he teamed up with. So the one-armed swordsman. Is that
also on the villain side, Zatoichi?
Yes.
For some reason, he's a bad guy.
So the people who are bad guys are mind you, once again, just to recap, Bruce Lee has gone to the underworld, so he is in the afterlife, and he wants to clean it up down there. And the bad guys who don't want him to clean up the afterlife are that group that Tony just described: Dracula, James Bond, the Japanese hero Zatoichi, Clint Eastwood. Yeah. The Godfather, who is presented as a Frenchman.
Nice.
No.
Sorry, the Godfather's The Exorcist is presented as a Frenchman, and Emmanuel, who is not presented as a Frenchwoman. And on his side, he's got the one-armed swordsman, Kane from Kung Fu, and Popeye.
That's crazy.
I don't even know. Popeye's not dead. I don't even know what's going on with these things. Why is James Bond a bad guy? I guess because this is a Hong Kong movie. And somehow James Bond is part of is the enemy. I don't know. I can't explain any of that stuff. But boy, Tony had discovered this thing and said, "Oh, you should watch this." I'm like, "Well, all right, sure, anything with Dracula and Emmanuel." And it is.
Jason really can tell you anything with Dracula or Emmanuel is really how it goes.
But this has both, and The Exorcist, and The Godfather, and Popeye, and James Bond, and Clint Eastwood. It defies. The pitch meeting for that. I want to know why, other than
be a fly on the wall.
And the things that they do with Bruce Lee also, where you're like, so this is an homage. This is how you remember him. This is how you keep his memory alive. Oh, okay, sure. It's amazing. And thanks to the Lars. I think it may have been Lars who showed this. Lars, it was a Weird Wednesday at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was Lars that was hosting it. It may have been Laird, who's also amazing. And either way, it blew my mind, and it's on the channel now. And I had to show it to Jason. I was just going to show him the beginning, and we just decided, no, you can't stop it there. You have to. You have to see the whole Kung Fu mummies, zombies who were basically just people in skeleton suits. Cheap
Dracula has an army of mummies. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And Popeye fights mummies, by spinning around, and at one point, he eats his spinach. What I love, 1977 Hong Kong movie, there's clearly no thought as to, do we need to license Popeye? Is that a thing? Do we need to worry about are we gonna get sued if we use Emmanuel? No one cares. It's just throw it all in there. It's fine.
Emmanuel isn't a public domain character.
No, huh? No. However, there are enough.
I don't know why I thought he was, but
no. Yeah. Because Emmanuel, the novel, came out in 1974. So no, that's very much in the copyright.
Maybe I just somehow have the Emmanuel. I floated around the Emmanuel phenomenon, and I thought the character was older.
By the way, I apologize. I'm looking it up now. 1959. The novel came out in 1959, but no, it's still very much in copyright. So. But remember, when you get into international stuff, people just steal. Meaning no disrespect, but they steal like crazy. Clint Eastwood is clearly, he himself. They use his name. They say, well, there's no reason that he should be defeated. He's Clint Eastwood. And they just they don't care.
who is also not dead.
It is sort of complimentary to Clint Eastwood's status as a badass, or a figure that is thought of as a badass. It's like, well, the only way we can possibly defeat Bruce Lee is with Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, also it's because it's not like you would think they would go, oh, it's a man with no name. No. It's Clint Eastwood, spaghetti western Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it is an amazing head scratching just phenomena, this movie.
Yeah. So I know we've spent a long time on it, but The Dragon Lives Again, 1977. Definitely check that out and let us know if we need to do a whole episode on it, because God only knows.
I guess it has Dracula in it. It's tangentially
it's got
relevant.
Dracula and zombies and mummies. I mean, it fits our definition of horror. It can't not.
It's more than enough. It's more than enough criteria that I think that people who listen to this podcast would give us a pass on it. But
it is amazing.
I don't know why. I remember you guys talking about this movie earlier in the week when we were all together, but for some reason I thought y'all guys were both going to endorse Rampage. And then when you started talking about it, like, oh, of course,
Rampage is fun, but it is not this. We both enjoyed Rampage, and it was fun hanging out and watching Rampage. But again, our love of old weird things won out, I think.
Yeah.
Well, no. Kudos for you for not immediately plugging something that it probably doesn't need. Doesn't need the extra help. The magic of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But
I like Tony's way of putting it, though, that we have a great love of old weird things, because that actually pretty well describes most of what I watch.
Tangentially, maybe our wives do too.
Yes, more and more every year, I'm sorry to say.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's wonderful. All right, so this has been our episode.
The problem is, Tony, is that I'm older than Jason, so I can't quite go that way without.
Oh no!
So yeah, I may love old weird things, but I also happen to be one, I think.
So not true, though. I mean, it might be true. It might be true in years. Let me tell you, we walk in a room and everybody's like, "Who the heck is that old guy that you're with?" It is.
You were born old, though, right?
I was.
He was.
So, all right. This has been our episode on the Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. I am so thankful that we got to talk about this. I have no idea what's coming next. I have no idea what is coming next, but it promises to be good and strange.
So, one of these days, we should probably make a plan.
Well, yeah, but that would also require.
Well, we've been doing. People seem to be happy with the. I would actually like to know on our social media which people prefer, if they prefer doing. We'll probably get a lot of different opinions the way people are. But
are you talking about
prefer this versus where we just kind of fly blind and pick a different movie, which is kind of how it was when we first started out. We would just kind of throw a dart at a dartboard with a bunch of movie titles on it, and then we would go from there. Or do people prefer the more organized way we've been doing
the
it the last few
retrospectives?
years? Yeah,
I do want to get back to a retrospective soon, but I've sort of enjoyed this break of just going after stuff. And we have so many requests, by the way, that we haven't gotten to yet. So there's plenty of time.
I would love to do some horror movies. Like seeing Dark and Stormy Night has really made me want to get into doing some horror movies from the 30s. So if anybody has some
wonderful idea,
some vintage, black and white horror films that they would like to hear us yammer on about, mention that on the social media as well.
I'd like to get to some 50s and 60s black and white, like the Flesh Eaters and stuff like that. I also really, really want to watch The Car. I want to get to some more classy 70s horror. Oh God, The Car is so great. That car,
maybe that's it.
Like, it's a souped up Lincoln, and man, is it beautiful. I hope it's a real car that you can go see at a show somewhere, because gosh, is it a lovely machine. Anyway, if you're listening, yes, answer all these questions and more at our Facebook page. We totally will engage with you. We had so many people chiming in with their top 3 vampire movies. Next week, let's talk about some of those answers, in fact, that we heard. And because we definitely would be too long if we started talking about it now. And leave reviews on Facebook. It helps people find the show. We're so thankful that you're here. Have a fantastic week, everybody. Bye.
Night.
Night.
Later.